All right, it's a few minutes past the hour, so let's get started. My name is Andy Carlson, and I lead the customer team here at Swarmia. The way we're going to run this session is that I'll briefly talk about some of the larger trends we're seeing in measuring engineering productivity. And once we've set that scene, we'll take real life scenarios from growing software companies and walk through how to solve those bottlenecks with data. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to drop them in the Q&A here in Zoom. And we should have plenty of time at the end to take some of those questions. So to give you some background, for those of you who don't know Swarmia, we work with high growth technology companies like Outreach, Blinkist, Smartly. And over the years, we've come to realize that the challenges that their engineering organizations face are pretty universal. The problems these companies face all stem from the same thing. As engineering organizations and code bases grow, so does complexity. And when you're first starting out, everything moves fast. You're able to focus on your biggest priorities. The communication flows between teams and individuals. The architecture of your product might be simpler. And you're able to work on a few things at a time, get them done, and move quickly to the next thing. But as your engineering organization grows, you'll probably start running into some of these problems. You're losing visibility into what different parts of the engineering organization is working on. Your ability to deliver customer value, new features, and other product improvements slows down. Your engineers start burning out because now they have to spend much more time on things that used to feel easy. And even as you hire new developers, the overall productivity of your engineering organization keeps declining. These are pretty typical issues, right? So this is not the first time people and organizations and companies have tried fixing engineering productivity. But the problem is the early attempts were pretty unsuccessful. So in the early 2000s, many software leaders subscribed to agile metrics, and a lot of them still do today. That means data from your issue tracker, project management systems such as burn downs and velocity. But when you think about it, velocity doesn't actually measure development speed at all. Instead, it focuses more on planning accuracy. And it become this game of how many story points did we allocate to this task and how much time did that task actually take? Now, I'm not trying to say that that's useless data, but it's also not where most modern software companies should start measuring their journey, since they normally have bigger fish to fry. Next up, kind of 10 years later, a new breed of engineering measurement tools entered the market with GitHub-based activity data that measured stuff like lines of code, rework, and code churn. That stuff became popular. And the problem with those was that the data was used to stack rank developers based on, who wrote the highest number of lines of code, or penalize developers who would refactor code because they came up with better and more elegant solutions over time. And naturally, when you think about this, that doesn't make sense either. The solution, with the highest number of lines of code isn't always the most maintainable. And similarly, in modern software development, non-waterfall or agile environments, it should be totally fine to rewrite code frequently as you encounter better ways to solve the problem. So the important thing to note here is that neither of these attempts to quantify engineering productivity were based on any peer-reviewed or scientifically proven research. In other words, there's never been a correlation between velocity and business performance, or code churn and business performance. And what's worse is that in those metrics, using those metrics actually can indirectly harm the engineering organization. Developers get skeptical about, people spying on them, and sometimes they'll leave if they feel micromanaged or unfairly compared to their peers. So when the DevOps Research Association, also known as DORA, started building their annual State of DevOps report in 2014, this was groundbreaking, as it actually was the first attempt to draw correlation between business performance and software delivery. Then in 2018, the book Accelerate was really the first attempt to pull all of these learnings together from 4 years of rigorous DevOps research that the DORA organization did. And as you can see from this chart, high engineering performance is a really complicated topic, and it spans everything from autonomous teams to transformational leadership, from continuous delivery to disaster recovery testing. And it's almost a shame how DORA metrics have become synonymous with these 4 software delivery metrics of deployment frequency, change lead time, change failure rate, and time to restore service. And while these metrics are great for benchmarking your organization's software delivery performance against industry averages and establishing a baseline to improve, they only go into delivery, which is just one part of software delivery, software development productivity. And maybe to course correct a little bit from the impression that the 4 DORA metrics left, Dr. Nicole Forsgren and some of the other researchers from the DevOps Research Association published a new white paper in 2021 called The Space for Developer Productivity. And in it, the authors rightfully suggested that software productivity is much more than software delivery performance. They list 5 dimensions of software development productivity. The S is for satisfaction and well-being. The P is for performance. A is for activities. C, collaboration and communication. And E is for efficiency and flow. And this suggests that organizations should measure these on 3 different levels: the system level, the team level, and the individual level. But rather than coming up with metrics for each of these right off the bat, they suggest that engineering organizations identify 3 areas to start with and choose metrics that represent each level of those 3 dimensions across the system, the team, and individual level. So based on this research and years of practical experience in building high-performing software teams, we now know that engineering teams of successful companies have these things in common. They deploy often in small batches. They focus on creating customer value. They have high autonomy, transparency, and psychological safety. They invest in open communication and avoid working in silos. They have a culture of continuous improvement, and they make productivity improvements at the team level. And then this is where Swarmia comes in. So Swarmia has been built on an implementation of this research combined with years of practical experience working with high-performing engineering teams. And Swarmia works with your existing tools to provide more visibility and insights. However, we're not a dashboard that managers look at once a sprint or once a quarter. In Swarmia, everyone has the same visibility into opportunities with real tools to make commitments towards improvement. So knowing all that stuff we just talked about, both academically and from experience, it's still hard to know where to start. And that's why we'd strongly suggest that you start from the growing pains that you're currently experiencing in your engineering organization. So next, what I'm going to do is walk through some common examples of what those might be, and then how you can use combined data from your issue tracker and your version control system to unblock your teams. So let's start with a simple one. Almost every customer we speak to has the same high-level question. They want to know, what are our teams actually working on, and does that align with our plans? It can also sound something like this. Our goal is to spend 50% of our time on new features, but there's no simple way for us to see how close we're hitting that target. So the way we would start approaching this problem is by asking, do you currently have a way of categorizing, engineering organizations' work into different meaningful buckets? And if the answer is no, I know a great place to start. So this is what we call the balance framework. It was introduced by a former Dropbox VP of engineering, and we've adopted it here at Swarmia and made it our own. The way it works is that you imagine your work into 2 main categories: mandatory investments. So that's stuff like keeping the existing software operational, and you'll see that in the gray area down there. And the other category is elective investments. So those are building new things, improving existing things for customers, increasing productivity of our teams. You'll see that in the colored sections at the top. This framework is useful because it sheds light on how much time your teams are actually spending on simply keeping existing product up and running. And after that, how do they split their time between building the new features, improving the old ones, and then improving the overall productivity of the team? So there's a really good blog post about this. Our product manager, Laurie, he recently published a post about it on our blog as well. Pina is going to share that. She's managing our webinar here in the link in the chat in case you want to take a look, bookmark that and read it. But now let's move over to Swarmia so we can show you how we operationalize this framework. So I'm here in Swarmia. Just so you know, Swarmia exists on top of your tools, like I mentioned before. So we've connected GitHub, Jira, and Slack to create a feedback loop and to provide visibility in new and different ways. And this is the highest level view in Swarmia. We call it the investment distribution. It allows you to categorize those different types of work, themes, and objectives into buckets any way you want. So again, I was talking about the Dropbox framework, but you can use whatever works for you. So here you could track roadmap work versus bugs, technical debt, or alternatively, some business priorities. It's really easy to set up. There's a link right here that allows you to do that. In Swarmia, these categories are fully configurable. So we allow you to map your work and activity to the categories based off of the existing labels and attributes from Jira and GitHub. And the engineers can also categorize work in real time. So if you have some uncategorized or unlinked issues or pull requests, they can do that right through Slack notifications. But over time, tracking the investment distribution of your engineering organization can help you set more realistic timelines for some of those key business initiatives based off of what the teams are really working on and what's eating at their capacity. It'll also improve conversations with stakeholders as you'll have a better understanding of all that non-roadmap work that the engineering team is working on. The other benefit we also hear from this view is that it helps developers have healthy conversations amongst themselves about technical debt and firefighting. As a developer, it can be exhausting to only work on maintenance tasks. So when they do recognize opportunities for some larger refactorings, this data can be useful in convincing the business that it'll be worth the time and the effort. But one of the most important parts throughout Swarmia, not just here on the investment distribution, but on our pull request page and insights pages, is that you can drill down to the data anywhere. So yes, we have the high level chart, and it's nice to see those high level trends, but it's the outliers and the details that support constructive conversations and opportunities for improvement. So without that, your dashboard isn't actionable. So just as an example, we just had a recent conversation. This is our data from the Swarmia team. And, one of the insights we had at our team demo, which happens weekly, was that we had a couple of weeks here where there were some production issues, some bugs, some things we were working on to keep the lights on. And it definitely affected how many new features we were able to focus on over those weeks. You can see we've got, higher percentages of that type of work here. And if we wanted to see really quickly, well, what were the things we were working on those particular weeks, we can drill into that investment category, scroll down here, and hover over any of these stories and tasks. You can see that these are on the left and see where the lion's share of that work was. So from June 5th to the 12th, this particular story had 8 pull requests, 8 issues, and 4 contributors. So that's the type of information that allows those teams to really understand what's happening, not just have this high level view. Okay, let's move on to another problem to solve. And this is another common one we hear all the time. Our focus is all over the place, and it feels like we're starting more projects than we're able to finish. Now, this is a slightly more nuanced than the first one, but I would validate this feeling by looking into how many issues the teams have in progress at once. So here's how I do that in Swarmia. So this is another unique view to Swarmia. It's called the work log. What we're seeing is a combination of activity that's coming from GitHub and it's represented here with these dots on a calendar. We're looking at a 2-week view, and it's organized for this team by issue. So you can see that we're looking at it organized by story. And we're showing pull requests and commits with the yellow and red circles. There's relative sizing. There's the ability to hover over these things and start to see who's working on what in more detail underneath. We've also, at the bottom, identified where sub-issues have been completed. So in Swarmia, you can see the target and the actual in the upper left corner of this work log when you filter by issue. And a good rule of thumb is that you limit the number of stories to the number of team members divided by 2 and -1. So that's a little tip that we do to try to limit work in progress. So if you have 8 people on that team, in the case, you should limit your work to a max of 3 stories. And by following this rule of thumb, your team will always be working or swarming together on stories before you pick up the new ones. So in this view, you'll also be able to click open a story or an epic, depending on what level you're looking at. This brings up a detailed view. In the pop-up here, I would pay special attention to this metric, flow efficiency. And you can see we've got a hover over that explains what that is. But essentially, flow efficiency of an issue is the percentage of the days where the issue was actively worked on compared to its whole lifetime. And we're also representing that here with these activity squares, just like on the last page. So you can see some of that activity. You can see the days that were being worked, the days that weren't. So this isn't bad, but this could indicate a pattern of too much work in progress, some context switching. Again, it's the details that allow teams to have better conversations about the way they're approaching their work to make some meaningful improvements. So if you notice that there are too many stories open with multiple days or inactivity, this usually means there are either some blockers like slow code reviews, maybe people are out with illness, or your team is just working on too many things at once. There's a lot of patterns here in our work log. And for those of you who are Swarmia users or might decide to explore Swarmia, we do offer a free trial. You can click this info button and start to see some of those different patterns that can be exposed by viewing in the work log. If you click the upper right-hand corner of the work log, you'll get a high-level view. So this is a quick way to see whether too much work in progress is an issue. And the pattern you should be seeing here, you're looking at a year's worth of work, if you scroll backwards, is this stair-step view. So the dark squares, the dark blue squares, are representing activity, and you can hover over and see where those activities are. Again, we're showing the issues on the left side. And when we have, limited work in progress, and our blue squares aren't all over the place, it shows that we're starting work and we're finishing it. Here down at the bottom, you can see that we've got a blog story that captures some of the marketing work that the team participates on, and it continues to live on. Now, if this was actually a customer-facing feature, all of this space in between the work we're doing is actually waste. It's time that we have not realized the value. So we could either break that into something smaller or focus on completing it and moving on. In any case, this enables teams to have honest discussions and set some clear guidelines for the size and the optimal length of stories. And some of those guidelines you can even automate with Swarmia's working agreements. So I'm going to navigate to the working agreement page. This is another unique feature that makes these insights actionable on teams. So we have a catalog of working agreements that you can select at the team level, and you can select a working agreement like avoid working alone on stories, or limiting the number of pull requests, stories, or tasks your teams are allowed to work on at once. We can also limit the time an issue is allowed to be in progress. One of the most popular ones is, just reviewing pull requests in less than 1 day, kind of focusing on that review time for a pull request. So when you automate working agreements here in Swarmia, we provide you with some insight and data right here in context of how that's going. We let you configure it. And then we also build in a feedback loop with Slack that alerts the teams and provides gentle nudges about exceptions so that the teams can hold themselves accountable. And one of the ways to see that is through our Slack notifications. So this is a preview of one of the daily digests that the teams receive in their Slack channels. And it's a once a day notification that summarizes some of the activity. So the daily digest and the individual Slack notifications are fundamental parts of the feedback loop that we've created to help teams identify areas for improvements and hold themselves accountable. In addition, those personal notifications that engineers can opt into have been described as essential by our user base. So over half of Swarmia's users are actually engineers. And this is a huge improvement on what GitHub offers outside of the box, out of the box. So our goal is to make lives easier, and that's a tenet to our product strategy. Okay, we've got one more problem to talk about. This is the third one, and this is one that we hear most often from developers. So it's taking too long for my code to be reviewed, and some of our pull requests are falling through the cracks. So especially if your teams frequently work on multiple repositories, you probably notice that it's really easy to forget about a PR or leave it open for all eternity. However, as one of our customers said to us the other day, code ages like milk, not wine. And that's why these stale and old pull requests often have to be discarded completely instead of merged. They just aren't relevant anymore. So how do we look at that in Swarmia? In Swarmia, we have this pull request page, and it allows us to see our team's open pull requests all at one glance. Many of the developers who use Swarmia bookmark this page and look at it weekly to see that they're not missing anything. Another thing that's powerful about this is GitHub surprisingly doesn't do a great job at looking across repositories. So we're pulling on all the pull requests that a team might be working on, no matter where they're working. And you can see on the left, we've got different filters. So we can look at the ones that our teams have open, merged, closed. We can look at the ones that I'm participating on. Thank heavens I'm not. I'm just a customers guy. We also filter out the bots, and then start to give you some visibility into some of these age or older pull requests. So typically when someone connects GitHub for the first time with Swarmia, an organization, there's going to be these pull requests that you might never have known were out there. We see it all the time, years old, months old. We also give the ability to exclude those pull requests so that it's not a sticking point with the engineers. Sure, it's an outlier. Sure, we recognized it. However, let's move on and really see moving forward, what's important to focus on. What are the trends the teams are having? Another thing that I like to look at initially when we turn Swarmia on for the first time with a client is just this high-level look of cycle time. Now, we do have charts that dive into the details in our insights page, but this breaks cycle time into three major phases. In progress, how long we were actually working on the pull request. Review, how long did that sit before someone actually reviewed it? And then once it's reviewed, how long did it take to merge? So immediately, organizations usually find opportunity with that review time. Typically it's bloated. For some reason, we're just not very disciplined. Not always, but it's usually an easy opportunity to start improving. And in that case, we can adopt a working agreement that starts to bring that to our attention in our daily digests and personal notifications, so that when code is ready to be reviewed, the teams that are being asked to review it get notified and start doing that a little bit more quickly. So, as I mentioned earlier, the other thing that helps Swarmia's users are these GitHub notifications on Slack. So those are important to call out when someone reviews your code, comments on your PR, requests your review, you'll get immediately notified. And this way, it's harder to let any of those PRs fall through the cracks. You'll actually notice that you'll get faster code reviews by having Swarmia ping people in Slack. Okay, so let's wrap up. Based off some of the examples I shared, I'll leave you with three things. First one is, you can't improve what you don't measure. So a lot of people come to Swarmia without knowing what their software development organization's biggest productivity issues are, and that's okay. Swarmia helps them explore their data in new ways, identify opportunities for improvement, and then systematically work towards those goals they set. One at a time. That's the key. You can't turn a bunch of working agreements on and expect change to happen overnight. This takes trust. It takes transparency. But it's important that you need to start somewhere. Two, even if you're feeling overwhelmed after seeing all your data in a tool like Swarmia and potentially identifying multiple improvement areas, we recommend starting improving from some of the smallest increments of work. And in that case, that's reducing your pull request cycle time by investing in faster code reviews and better visibility into all open pull requests. You should start seeing improvements in as little as a week or two. And the third is that while engineering metrics are often painted as a leadership issue, let's face it, real productivity improvements happen with the engineering teams. And that's why it's important to get buy-in from engineers, convince them that this isn't a corporate spying initiative, and actually, present them with something that will help them work together better as a team, even as your organization grows. So I showed you some parts of Swarmia today already, but I'll just be honest, it looks a lot better with your own data. So, we offer a free 14-day trial. It takes 15 minutes to connect GitHub through the GitHub Marketplace. And we also offer support onboarding our team from our customer success organization. So if you happen to work at a startup, I've got even better news. You can use Swarmia for free if you have less than 20 active contributors. Getting everything up and going is pretty easy. The first step is to connect GitHub. Then you connect your issue tracker. So we support Jira and Linear. Then Slack is trivial. And you'll get your first insights within 15 minutes from that first connection to GitHub. So if you prefer a demo, our team is here to support you as well. And you can book some time from a link that we'll share with you. I hope that was useful. Let's see if we have any questions. We have plenty of time. We wanted to leave time, let you get off if you have to go to lunch or anything like that. But thank you for joining. And my colleague Brian Hayes is here, and he'll pick a few questions from the list. If we don't get to everyone's questions, or we don't have a great answer right here on the spot, we'll make sure we'll follow up with you via email. So, Brian, are you there? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, it looks like we got a few good questions. First question, I have teams working in different agile ways. How does Swarmia work with Scrum versus Kanban?
Okay. Yeah, those are pretty specific agile methodologies. One of our product principles here is that we recognize that all teams are working on different types of work. They're working in different ways. Even within the same organization, you're going to see variations of agile practices if they're working on reactive work or roadmap work. So with that in mind, it being a product principle, you notice we didn't have any Scrum language in there. Pull requests are pretty agnostic to agile processes, but we also recognize that the organizations, 60% of organizations, or whatever that statistic is, are using Scrum. So we actually have some new work that we're doing that are introducing and pulling in more Scrum metrics and Scrum, views like sprint views into the product. So that's on our short-term roadmap. So again, you should have success and see insight regardless of your process. It's a hard task for us to make everybody happy, but that's what we're here to do. So hopefully that's useful.
All right, great. More questions coming in. Let's see. How are those investment categories used? Is it all meant for engineers to assign manually for every PR, or is it possible to make those assignments automatic somehow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I could go back in and show you, but that little link I showed in the upper right-hand corner allows you to configure those. We put a lot of effort into configuring the categories so that you can stack rank them, because we recognize pull requests get associated to multiple levels of planning, tasks, stories, epics. We want that data to roll up and make sense. So you configure those into the categories that are meaningful to your organization. And then when you make those configurations, there are filters that apply Jira labels, pull request attributes, so that there is automatic categorization. In fact, when you sign up and connect to Swarmia, we actually take a guess. So if Jira tickets have feature in the name, we'll put that into the roadmap items. Same for defects. So the default categories are a little more basic than the Dropbox ones that we're using, but there is automatic assignment. So you're absolutely correct in that assumption. Thanks for the question.
Cool. All right, next question. How do you measure cycle time in Swarmia?
Yeah, I started to step through that on the pull request page, but we look at either when the pull request is made or the first commit, which is either, as the starting point. And then those milestones I shared around the review and the merge. So the total cycle time is from that first commit or pull request to merge back into the code base.
Great. All right, last question. Does Swarmia only work with GitHub, or does it work with other repositories like Bitbucket?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, where we are is we've chosen GitHub and Jira and Slack as industry leaders. So we do not currently have connections to Bitbucket, GitLabs, and other code repositories. If you happen to have GitHub but not Jira, we do have a light product, which is a quarter of the cost, which gives you all the DORA insights. Obviously, it's not going to give you the insights around the Jira issues and things like that. It doesn't make that connection yet, but we will be building more integrations. But right now, we're working closely with our customers, providing feedback on the product, trying to work a little faster and build even more value into those current solutions. So, certainly go to our website and fill out the form if you are using Bitbucket, and we will let you know when that integration becomes available.
Great. It looks like that's all the questions we have for now.
Cool. Yeah, well, this was our first webinar on this topic. Hopefully it was useful, sharing some industry data and research, in addition to showing a little bit about why we exist and how we do things. Again, Pina was going to share some links in the chat around the Dropbox article. We could also share a couple more links around either scheduling a demo, filling out our form if you're interested in learning more, talking to our team. But thanks a lot for showing up today. And thank you, Kyle, for sending me a blast from the past. We hope to engage with your teams if this is something interesting to you, and we'll see you around. So thanks a lot for today.